the military in this Trump administration. At this point, we have no indication that the U.S. is going to draw down any of those forces. And it's a combination of things. It is that deterrence, which they believe the military provides against what this all, we were told, started about, and that was about drugs in the region, trying to stop the flow of any kind of drugs. The majority of the ones coming from Venezuela are not coming to the United States, but stopping the flow of drugs out of Venezuela. But what's clear is that this is also about pressuring Venezuela, pressuring initially the Maduro regime and now the new Venezuelan government, the U.S. military being used for that. I also wouldn't expect any let up on the gas of what the military we were told was really there for, Operation Southern Spear. And that is supposed to be at its heart an operation that is supposed to be stopping the flow of narcotics in the region. I wouldn't be surprised, Hallie, if we continue to see strikes on alleged drug boats coming in and out of the area. There have been over 30 of them since the first day, the 1st of September. More than 100 people have been killed. Another thing that's been really fascinating as we've watched this unfold over the last day and a half is when talking about this operation yesterday down at Mar-a-Lago, some of the analogy or the comparisons that were made by the Trump administration officials to those boat strikes. In some ways, they're using the same legal justification for the strikes as they used for this mission into Caracas.
Courtney Kube, a lot to unpack there. We'll look for more of your reporting on NBC News, on NBCNews.com, and then tonight on Nightly News. Thanks, Court. I want to bring in for more General Wesley Clark, former Supreme Allied Commander for NATO. General Clark, it's good to see you again. Thank you for being on with us.
I was also the Southcom commander.
You know this region well. You're beating me to the punch on that. So let me start there then. Let's go there. You know this area. You know this region. When Secretary of State Rubio talks about U.S. troops in the region as leverage, how do you understand that? How should we be thinking about that?
Oh, I think the hammer is going to fall on several countries down here, and it's just a question of how it's played. Cuba certainly is at risk, and the president of Colombia has been put on notice. So I think the administration's working to cut out the leadership of those countries that don't seem to support the United States and President Trump. So he's got Argentina on his side. He's got El Salvador on his side, certainly. He's got Chile on his side now. He doesn't have Brazil. He doesn't have Colombia. I think he has Peru on his side. So I think this is all about the national security strategy and using force to try to set up the strategy. But the problem with this is that there's 450 million people down there, and they're not all inclined to go along with the United States, especially when we talk about taking oil and putting U.S. money into oil. This has been the proverbial curse of the United States, is to be blamed for going in someplace and trying to make money off of it. And so I think that we're in a really, really uncertain period right here. And it's possible that a lot of chaos is going to be released into this hemisphere.
Within reason, what would it take to mitigate that chaos and uncertainty?
I think you've got to have a moral purpose above making money and seizing oil for what you're doing. So there hasn't been any discussion about democracy. All that jubilation in South Florida about getting rid of a dictator and so forth. And looks like we're trying to just keep them in power, get a hold of the oil. Maybe there's some geopolitics here. Certainly the Russians and Chinese won't like it with the demonstration of U.S. military power. But if we're just sustaining autocratic regimes or putting autocratic regimes in place that are friendly to us, the policy doesn't have any durability, and it will invite not only chaos there, but retaliation in the United States through terrorist actions and other things here.
General, you say that the Trump administration is using force to set up the national security strategy, right? The use of force in order to get to that end result. That is a real paradigm shift from the way that typically the U.S. has seen its role in the Western Hemisphere. It's
a huge paradigm shift. You know, we've been trying for 100 years to get over the 1920s when we intervened in Central America to save banana plantations, or the 1930s when we put the Marines into Haiti and we didn't get much accomplished there. We've worked with the Organization of American States, the Washington Office on Latin America. We've put diplomats in there. We've done the Summit of the Americas. We've We've tried to cultivate friendship through the Inter-American Development Bank and many other things to try to reach out to Latin America. This turns this all upside down. The way it's been portrayed, and especially yesterday in the discussion of oil and then the back and forth with the vice president of Venezuela, it makes it look very, very antique. This is a throwback to the late 19th century when the United States lusted after the real estate in Cuba, and we invaded Cuba only to find it was too hot to hang on to.
General Wesley Clark, it is a real privilege for us to have your expertise and your analysis with us. Please come back. I hope we talk again, I'm sure, in the days to come. Appreciate it. Thank you. I want to bring in now our NBC News foreign correspondent, Raf Sanchez, who has posted up for us overseas in London. And Raf, this is a moment that the world is watching. They are watching closely for the reasons that the general laid out, the questions of uncertainty in the days and hours ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, Hallie. This is all playing out in the Western Hemisphere, but as you said, is being watched around the world. Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves. There are major questions about international law at stake here. So this is a topic of global conversation. Here in Europe, the NATO allies are being fairly cautious. They don't want to anger President Trump. Few of them are sorry to see the back of Nicolas Maduro. The European Union joins the United States in declaring him an illegitimate president after he stole the last election in Venezuela. But on the other hand, there are major concerns about international law. These are European leaders who every day are talking about international law in the context of Ukraine. They are saying that Vladimir Putin illegally invaded a sovereign country, and now they are trying to explain why that is different from the United States attacking a neighboring country and capturing its leader. I want to read you just a little bit of a statement from the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. It captures a little bit of that attempt at balance. The British Prime Minister saying the UK has long supported a transition of power in Venezuela. We regarded Maduro as an illegitimate president, and at the same time saying that they reiterate their support for international law. Hallie.
Raf Sanchez live for us in London. Raf, it's good to see you. Thank you. I want to bring in now somebody who knows this region well, who understands it, and who has been covering it for a long time. And that is, let me say, Andrew Latham, who is a professor of international relations at Macalester College. We're working to get him up and with us here because, as you've heard, there are real questions now over the next 48 hours, over the next week, month, et cetera, both in the very short term and in the near short term, about what happens in Venezuela, especially with these new comments from President Trump about Venezuelan leadership, as we've been reporting here over the course of the last 30 minutes. Let me bring in, too, on the other piece of this, which is the oil, and you heard General Clark talking about this, somebody who also understands that, John Kilduff, partner at Again Capital, which provides investment advisory in energy and oil. John, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Good to be with you.
The oil piece of this has been from the jump, something we've heard about from President Trump after the capture of Nicolas Maduro as he was being brought back to New York. Help us understand what happens from here, because the president has said that the U.S. will take a heavy hand in rebuilding oil infrastructure in Venezuela.
Well, what should happen from here is that the remnants of a once great national oil company, PDVSA, is there. And it's there, and it exists partly because of immense investment by two of our U.S. oil companies, Chevron and ExxonMobil. Both of those companies, we're talking about what's right and wrong here to a degree, they both invested over $1 billion each in PDVSA and the Venezuelan oil economy. And they were both taken from them by the Chavez and Maduro regimes. So they are the ones that were left really stripped of major investments in a company, in a country that provides key source of oil to the U.S. Gulf Coast refining companies, or they could, because the Venezuelan oil is a special blend. It's very what we call heavy and sour. It has to be processed. But our U.S. Gulf Coast refiners were specifically built to refine that oil into U.S. gasoline, diesel fuel, jet fuel. So it was an important source of supply to the U.S. over the decades. That industry has fallen into terrific disrepair. It won't take much to get a slug of oil back onto the market. It should lower oil prices, lower gasoline prices for the U.S. consumer.
John, in a nutshell, what does this mean for oil and gas prices here in America?
They should be going lower. They could be going a lot lower if the administration handles the rebuild rapidly, quickly, and effectively.
John Kilduff, we're glad to have you. Thank you very much for your expertise and for being with us today. Let me go back now to Professor Andrew Latham, Professor of International Relations at Macalester College. Professor, good to see you again. Let me ask you about these newest comments from President Trump, suggesting that if Delcy Rodriguez, the, of course, vice president, now the interim president of Venezuela, does not essentially cooperate with the United States, she could pay what the president describes as a bigger price than Maduro. How does that conflict point create a domino effect now in the region?
Well, it looks like President Trump is going to keep applying pressure. Whoever rises to the top, once there's another act of decapitation that takes place, trying to put pressure on them to do a deal which is favorable to and advantageous to the United States. It all turns really ultimately on how resilient and robust that regime is and who the person at the top of that pyramid is, who's calling the shots. If they are confident that they have the support of the other elements of the regime, they'll resist President Trump and they'll turn perhaps to Russia or China for various kinds of support in that. If, on the other hand, that regime begins to fracture and fragment, then the person at the top, the apex of that, the ultimate shot caller, is not going to be in a position to resist Trump. And then we might see some accommodation. It really wouldn't take much, by the way, for Venezuela to get in line to denationalize the oil industry and to minimize the influence of China and Russia. At the end of the day, all they talk about narco trafficking notwithstanding, those are the big issues. The extra hemispheric influence of Russia and China and access to this particular kind of crude.
Professor Latham, it is super interesting. I got to have you back. I know we're out of time for today, but please come back. More to talk about as we look ahead to that court appearance tomorrow for Nicolas Maduro. As thanks to all of our contributors and reporters here, and a thanks to you for watching. More coverage coming up later today, right here on NBC News.
This Sunday, captured. U.S. Special Operation Forces launch an attack in Venezuela, capturing President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, flying them out of the country and charging Maduro with drug trafficking crimes.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition.
This is America First. Don't play games with this president's in office, because it's not going to turn out well.
What happens next?
We're not afraid of boots on the ground.
Why didn't the president get authorization from Congress?
Make Venezuela great again.
And how does this fit with President Trump's America First agenda?
We're in the oil business. We're going to sell it to them.
My guest this morning, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries of New York, and Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. Joining me for insight and analysis are NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons, Amna Nawaz, co-anchor of PBS NewsHour, Mark Short, former Director of Legislative Affairs to President Trump, and Neera Tanden, President of the Center for American Progress. Welcome to Sunday. It's Meet the Press.
From NBC News in Washington, the longest-running show in television history, this is Meet the Press with Kristen Welker.
Good Sunday morning. We begin with the extraordinary breaking news out of Venezuela. The country's leader, Nicolas Maduro, now sits in a detention center in Brooklyn, New York, after being captured by U.S. Special Forces. It was an operation that President Trump and his national security team oversaw in the early morning hours Saturday. It came after months of preparation, weeks of waiting for the right conditions to be met, and hours of high-risk covert operations that left several service members injured but no U.S. fatalities. President Trump now says the U.S. will run Venezuela until there's a proper transition and not ruling out putting boots on the ground. Congress was not briefed before the military operation and is now demanding answers. Joining me now is Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Secretary Rubio, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to start with this big picture question. Is the United States now at war with Venezuela?
There's not a war. I mean, we are at war against drug trafficking organizations. It's not a war against Venezuela. We are enforcing American laws with regards to oil sanctions. We have sanctioned entities. We go to court. We get a warrant. We seize those boats with oil. And that will continue. And we would continue to reserve the right to take strikes against drug boats that are bringing drugs towards the United States that are being operated by transnational criminal organizations, including the Cartel de los Sols. Of course, the leader of that cartel, is now in U.S. custody and facing U.S. justice in the Southern District of New York, and that's Nicolas Maduro. So we made a big progress in that regard.
Mr. Secretary, who is in charge? Are you running Venezuela right now?
Yeah, I mean, I keep people, fixating on that. Here's the bottom line on it is we expect to see changes in Venezuela. Changes of all kinds, long-term, short-term. We'd love to see all kinds of changes, but the most immediate changes are the ones that are in the national interest of the United States. That's why we're involved here, because of how it applies and has a direct impact on the United States. Okay, we are not going to be able to allow in our hemisphere a country that becomes a crossroads for the activities of all of our adversaries around the world. We just can't allow it. We can't have a country where the people in charge of its military and in charge of its police department are openly cooperating with drug trafficking organizations. We're not going to allow that. These things are direct threats to the United States, and we intend to use every element of leverage that we have to ensure that changes. The one I would point everyone to is that our military is helping the Coast Guard conduct a law enforcement function, which is not just the capture of Maduro, but the enforcement of our sanctions. We go to court, we get a warrant, we seize the boats. And we think this is tremendous leverage, incredible, crippling leverage, which we intend to continue to use until we see the changes that we need to see that are benefit to the American people. And by the way, we believe to the people of Venezuela as well.
But Mr. Secretary, I think there's a lot of questions about who the point people are during this transition. President Trump said we're going to run the country. So is it you? Is it Secretary Hegseth? Who are those people who will be running the country specifically?
Well, it's not running, it's running policy. The policy with regards to this. We want Venezuela to move in a certain direction because not only do we think it's good for the people of Venezuela, it's in our national interest. It either touches on something that's a threat to our national security or touches on something that's either beneficial or harmful.
And are you involved in that transition,
so obviously
Secretary?
I'm very involved in this. Well, of course. I mean, I think everyone knows I'm pretty involved on politics in this hemisphere. Obviously, as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, very involved in all these elements. The Department of War plays a very important role here, along with the Department of Justice, for example, because they're the ones that have to go to court. So this is a team effort by the entire national security apparatus of our country, but it is running this policy. And the goal of the policy is to see changes in Venezuela that are beneficial to the United States, first and foremost, because that's who we work for, but also, we believe, beneficial for the people of Venezuela who have suffered tremendously. We want a better future for Venezuela, and we think a better future for the people of Venezuela also is stabilizing for the region and makes the neighborhood we live in a much better and safer place.
President Trump said the administration is working with Maduro's Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez. Why does the administration oppose working with the opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado? She's the Nobel Peace Prize winner, of course, as well. Her coalition has the support of 70% of Venezuelans. Why not work with her?
Well, a couple things. First of all, Maria Corina Machado is fantastic, and she's someone I've known for a very long time, and that whole movement is. But we are dealing with the immediate reality. The immediate reality is that unfortunately, and sadly, but unfortunately, the vast majority of the opposition is no longer present inside of Venezuela. We have short-term things that have to be addressed right away. We all wish to see a bright future for Venezuela, a transition to democracy. All of these things are great, and we all want to see that. I've worked on that for 15 years on a personal level, both in the Senate and now as National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. These are things I still care about, we still care about. But what we're talking about is what happens over the next 2-3 weeks, 2-3 months, and how that ties to the national interest of the United States. And so we expect to see more compliance and cooperation than we were previously receiving. With Nicolas Maduro, you could not make a deal or an arrangement. Although he, by the way, was given very generous offers. He could have left Venezuela as recently as, a week and a half ago. There were opportunities available for him to avoid all of this because he's not someone we can work with. He suckered the Biden administration into stupid deals. He's made a career out of not keeping deals and figuring out how to save himself by buying time. And President Trump was not going to fall into that trap. So now there are other people in charge of the military and police apparatus there. They're going to have to decide now what direction they want to go. And we hope they will choose a different direction than the one Nicolas Maduro picked. Ultimately, we hope this leads to a holistic transition all the way around in Venezuela, societal, political, all of that. We're in favor of all of that. But right now, we have to take the first steps. And the first steps are securing what's in the national interest of the United States and also beneficial to the people of Venezuela. And those are the things that we're focused on right now. No more drug trafficking, no more Iran Hezbollah presence there, and no more using the oil industry to enrich all our adversaries around the world and not benefiting the people of Venezuela, or frankly, benefiting the United States and the region.
You talk about a holistic transition. I think there's a lot of focus on potential elections. How soon will elections be held? Within 30 days, Mr. Secretary?
Elections? Well, look, this is a country that's been governed by this regime now for 14 or 15 years. The elections should have happened a long time ago. The elections did happen. They lost them, and they didn't count the votes, or they refused to count the votes, and everyone knows it. So all of that, I think, is premature at this point. There's a lot of work to be done here. Right now, what we are focused in, let's be realistic here, what we are focused on right now is all of the problems we had with when Maduro was there. We still have those problems in terms of them needing to be addressed. We are going to give people an opportunity to address those challenges and those problems. Until they address it, they will continue to face this oil quarantine. They will continue to face pressure from the United States. We will continue to target drug boats if they try to run towards the United States. We will continue to seize the boats that are sanctioned with court orders. We will continue to do that, and potentially other things, until the things we need to see addressed are addressed. Because ultimately, above everything else, we care about elections, we care about democracy, we care about all of that. But the number one thing we care about is the safety, security, well-being, and prosperity of the United States. And that's what we're going to focus on first and foremost here. And that's what these policies, these changes we need to see made are about.
Okay, significant there. You say you will continue to seize boats when necessary. I want to ask you about boots on the ground. A lot of attention on that. The president was asked about the possibility of U.S. boots on the ground. He said, quote, "We're not afraid of it." How many U.S. forces are on the ground right now in Venezuela? Are there any?
We don't have U.S. forces on the ground in Venezuela. No, we don't have U.S. forces on the ground. Everyone knows. They were on the ground for about 2 hours when they went to capture Maduro. And I think what the president is saying is very simple, and that is, as president of the United States, he is not going to go around telling people what he's not going to do. He's not going to go around saying, I won't do this, I won't do that. Yes, I care about this issue, but I'll only go so far. He retains all this optionality. In the particular case you're citing, this was, in essence, at its core, a law enforcement function. Okay, the Department of Justice, dating back in the Biden administration, that had a $25 million reward for his capture. So we have a reward for his capture, but we're not going to enforce it. That's the difference between President Trump and everybody else. It's easy to make a wanted poster and say $50 million for the capture of Maduro, but no one takes that seriously because you're not going to do anything about it. President Trump did something about it.
Let me ask you.
He did something about it. We went in, we grabbed him, he was arrested, and he's now in New York. No Americans were killed, no equipment was lost. It had to be done, and it's been done. And I assure you, the people left behind in Venezuela now that are in charge of the police and everything else, I assure you, they're going to probably be a lot more compliant than Maduro was as a result of this.
Well, President Trump told the New York Post there won't be troops in Venezuela as long as Delcy Rodriguez, quote, does what we want. She's already, though, demanding the release of Nicolas Maduro. As you know, she's insisting that her country never become a colony. What exactly does Rodriguez need to do to keep U.S. troops out of Venezuela?
Well, forget about the U.S. troops portion of it. What needs to happen for any of this to change, for our relations with Venezuela to change and our whole approach to it to change, the things we have talked about are the ones I've highlighted already. You can't flood this country with gang members. You can't flood this country with drugs that are coming out of Colombia through Venezuela with the cooperation of elements of your security forces. You can't turn Venezuela into the operating hub for Iran, for Russia, for Hezbollah, for China, for the Cuban intelligence agents that control that country. That cannot continue. Those things cannot continue to be in place. You cannot continue to have the largest oil reserves, in the world under the control of adversaries of the United States, not benefiting the people of Venezuela and stolen by a handful of oligarchs around the world, including inside of Venezuela, but not benefiting the people of that country. You know, we've seen how our adversaries all over the world are exploiting and extracting resources from Africa, from every other country. They're not going to do it in the Western Hemisphere. Yeah. They are not. That is not going to happen under President Trump. Read our national security strategy. He is serious about it, and he's going to do something about it, and we're doing something about it.
Let me ask you about oil. The president says the U.S. is taking over the oil. The question is, I guess, if the purpose of the operation was to capture Maduro and bring him to justice, why does the United States need to take over the Venezuelan oil industry?
Well, we don't need to. First of all, let me go back up. We don't need Venezuela's oil. We have plenty of oil in the United States. What we're not going to allow is for the oil industry in Venezuela to be controlled by adversaries of the United States. You have to understand, why does China need their oil? Why does Russia need their oil? Why does Iran need their oil? They're not even in this continent. This is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live. And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be a base of operation for adversaries, competitors, and rivals of the United States.
Have specific oil companies?
We also want to see that oil and the proceeds from it. Hold on. We want to see the oil proceeds of that country benefit the people of Venezuela. Why have 8 million people left Venezuela? 8 million, the single largest mass migration probably in modern history, left Venezuela in 2014 because all the wealth of that country was stolen to the benefit of Maduro and his cronies in the regime